Istvan, thanks for sitting down with me.
You're very welcome.
And congrats on being this year's Plant Breeding and Genetics Award winner.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Now, this award is sponsored by Germination and Seeds Canada, and it recognizes a plant scientist who's had a big impact on the world of Canadian seed. Your list of accomplishments is extensive, hundreds of publications, over 80 soybean varieties, including OAC Kent, which actually is a past recipient of the Seed of the Year award. Now, you're a giant among soybean breeders, to say the least. You told me that the secret to your success is knowing how to give the market what it wants. How do you do that? How do you give the market what it wants?
Thank you. Yes, I mean, it is something that I learned from my predecessors and also from colleagues, that it is important to listen to the market, to market trends, to network, to be engaged, to be aware of the new trends that are happening, because that's the only way a plant breeder can stay relevant. Otherwise it would be a waste of our efforts and time if we develop varieties that nobody wanted. So how do we do it alternatively, to develop varieties that the market will want? It's listening to the market trends and speaking to seed companies that will end up marketing our varieties.
You're originally from Serbia.
Mm-hmm.
How did you get into this whole plant breeding game, eventually coming to Canada to be a soybean breeder? How did that all work out?
It's interesting. Many things that we do, at least in my life, I find are influenced by our teachers. And I had the pleasure of having excellent teachers of plant genetics and breeding at the University of Novi Sad in Serbia. During my undergrad, they enticed my interest in genetics. And then later on, my first job after graduating with a bachelor's degree was in sunflower breeding, where I could see how genetics could be put into practice for a tangible benefit in the form of new varieties and hybrids. So that's the simplest way to explain it. When I moved to Canada in 1991, I continued my graduate studies at the University of Guelph in canola breeding and genetics, and ended up working in the soybean industry for the last 25 years. And all of those crops that I've bred have been oilseeds. They're very different from one another, but they have one thing in common. They are grown for their oil and the meal in the seed. So that's in short how I ended up in plant breeding and genetics, because I just love that field.
Now, you've mentored and trained scores of graduate students who've become an icon of guidance and leadership for them. Many of those students currently lead successful plant breeding programs in companies like Bayer, Corteva Agriscience, also public institutions like University of Guelph and Vineland Research and Innovation Center. What makes a successful plant breeder this day and age?
Beside the things that I already mentioned in your previous question, in an answer to your previous question, I would say what makes a successful plant breeder is just being engaged with graduate students, learning from everyone we interact with, and that includes students themselves. I often tell them I learn from them as much as they learn from me. They make me a better mentor, a better professor, because they give me feedback on how to do that. So it's also important to know that when we are training somebody, a friend of mine many years ago said that a graduate student is like a rose. If you treat it well, it will bloom and be beautiful. If you don't, it will wither and die. So I try to treat the people that I interact with, whether they are graduate students or staff, well, and they respond. So that's been a true pleasure and a key to being a successful plant breeder for me.
OAC Wallace, that's your favorite soybean variety that you've developed. Why is that so special for you?
It's a very good question. OAC Wallace first of all, had a very good parentage. One of its parents was OAC Bayfield, which was also a previous recipient of the Seed of the Year award. That variety was developed by my faculty advisor for my PhD and predecessor, Dr. Wally Beversdorf. So when we test our varieties, we tend to compare them to the current commercial varieties that we call the yield checks. And if our new experimental lines are out-yielding the yield checks, that's always a good sign. What happened with OAC Wallace, it out-yielded in the first year of provincial yield trials, it out-yielded the checks by 15%. It had a 115% yield index, and that was like a wow moment for me. I thought, well, this could flip around in the following year, and sometimes it does happen. But I had a good feeling about that variety. I spoke to Secan. Secan said, let's produce breeder seed down in Chile to speed up the production. We sent the seed down to Chile, produced breeder seed. It came back, continued to perform well. When it came to naming the variety, OAC Wallace, I just decided to name it after my PhD co-advisor, Dr. Wally Beversdorf. I was fully aware that I was taking a chance because it could have flopped, and that would have been an embarrassment for me. Luckily, it didn't flop, and it was probably the #1 yielding variety in the maturity group 0 or 2600 heat units zone in Ontario for at least 10 years, if not 15. So that's the success story of OAC Wallace. A little bit of luck and a good choice of parents by my predecessor.
Looking to the future, yes. What most excites you that's coming down the pipe?
Absolutely. So in reference to your previous question, what makes a breeder successful, plant breeder successful, what I meant to say and forgot to mention, it's also keeping up with the literature, keeping up with the science of plant breeding. There is always new developments, new technologies that are being developed. I have to read a lot to be aware of what's happening, to find ways of implementing the new technologies in my program. So since several years ago, we started implementing genomic selection by use of molecular markers in our breeding program to make sure that our selection is more efficient and our program, as a result, is more productive. I will probably venture into high throughput phenotyping using the drones and such. We have done a little bit of research on that, but it's not fully implemented in my program. It seems promising. So there are many technologies that private seed companies are using and have been using, and public programs don't always use because of the lack of resources. So I intend to increase the use of new technologies in my program. What I will not do is I will not venture into genetically modified. My partners in the seed industry are quite good at developing GM soybean varieties, so we will stick with the non-GM food grade soybeans. That's what we do best. And I'm excited about addressing the needs of farmers, which are not only for high yield, but for yield protective traits such as disease resistance. Soybean cyst nematodes is the biggest disease of soybean worldwide, and it's been spreading throughout Ontario very rapidly. And now what used to be the case is I could develop a variety that didn't have SCN resistance in it, and it would still be successful. Now it's a must, so all the new varieties have to be SCN resistant, and we have to use more than one source of resistance for that. The sudden death syndrome is another disease that's spreading around Ontario, and development of SDS resistant varieties is another goal, as well as white mold resistance, and some abiotic stresses such as drought tolerance. That's what we are working on because of climate change. So many things on the list of things to do, but that's what excites me and motivates me to do more.
Looking forward to it. Thanks for joining me.
You're very welcome. Thank you. My pleasure.